Welcome to the Heidi Thorne Show. I'm your host, Heidi Thorne, and in this podcast, I share my real world self publishing and small business experience with you. So let's get started with today's show. Now, I was attending a writers' conference maybe a year or two ago, and during the Q&A for one of the sessions, one of the authors asked a question about crowdfunding his upcoming book project. And I think it was a memoir or something like that. And the speaker was a little taken aback, as I was. I was thinking, what is this person talking about? Luckily, another author in the audience raised her hand and says, oh, I've done that through, and I can't remember if it was GoFundMe or Kickstarter or one of those programs. And so the speaker said, well, why don't the two of you talk? So I'm thinking, oh, this is just a couple crazy authors who are doing something different. But then not too long after that conference, I got an email, or it was a LinkedIn post, or I can't remember what it was, about an author I know of who was also doing a crowd-funded book project. Okay, what is going on here? Is this just a crazy idea, or is it a really creative way and clever way to make money from self-publishing? So that's what we're going to talk about in today's show, crowdfunding book projects. Now, I think we really need to make a distinction early on between crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. Now, crowdsourcing is when you're collecting input or feedback from a group of people about something you're doing or an issue. And so it would be like saying to your audience, I'm thinking of writing a book, but I'm not exactly sure what I want to focus on. Can you give me some ideas of what you'd like to see in my book? That's crowdsourcing. Now, crowdfunding is telling your audience, I'm thinking about doing a book project. Would you be willing to support me financially? So I think you can see the big difference between the two. Now, how does a crowdfunding book project work? First of all, you would have to use a platform. I guess there's other ways to do it, but typically these days, authors would use a platform such as GoFundMe or Kickstarter or one of those capital fundraising programs that's usually online, and they handle a lot of the back-end details of collecting money from your donors or pledgers. So those are probably the most popular. And what it does is it provides you cash to complete your book project. Now you have to wonder, why would anyone in your audience want to give you money to write your book? First of all, you're probably going to reach out to family and friends, and they may want to support your project. That would not be unusual, but for other people who maybe are not as close to you and might be more of your author platform, your social media followers, your email subscribers, those kinds of people, they're not just willing to give you money just because they like you. They want to get something for it. So what they would get out of this is, one, the satisfaction that they've helped you with your book project, but they might get things from you like signed copies of your book. They might get special perks, such as one of the offers that I did see was where the author would provide a supply of books and would speak at your event or your group about the book. So it would include their speaking fees and all of that. So that was one of the higher level investments. And then the lower ones were either multiple copies of the books or signed copies of the books. So Some of them may want those special books, although I really do have to question that in a lot of ways. And you have to ask, well, why would an author do this? Why would an author pursue a crowdfunding book project? Let's be honest. Making money from self-publishing is tough, super tough. But even tougher is trying to get a traditional book deal with a big traditional trade publisher. So authors who might be frustrated with that whole system, whether it's traditional or self-publishing, might think, you know what, I'm just going to go direct to people who know and like me, and I'm going to ask them to support me. It's kind of like getting sponsors or donors for your work. Now, the sponsorship model for artists and other talent, such as writers, has been going on for centuries. So it's not a new thing, and it's not technically a bad thing, but there are some significant challenges to doing it. First of all, the crowdfunding aspect of it could hurt your image as an author. It's not technically a sale. In one of the last episodes, we talked about a Shark Tank type venture capital pitch for a book project where you're going to a traditional publisher. In this case, for crowdfunding, you're also pitching your book project to investors of sorts, but they are more like sponsors. And you have to think that some of these people who may be your potential readers for your books otherwise may be thinking, if this person is such a great author, why are they asking for a handout? So it really could hurt your image in the long run. And you need to understand the costs of crowdfunding. First of all, you need to do a thorough cost and profit margin analysis. One of the offers that I saw for this crowdfunding bit did offer, of course, the speaker at the event, plus a supply of signed copies. And you have to remember that that is print copies. So I suppose you could go through, Kindle Direct Publishing to do it, but typically they would be done on a commercial printing basis. You would do this as a special project. And then people have to think, well, why would I spend so much money, $25, $30? Why would I throw that into there when I can get the book on Amazon for 10 or 15? So the costs of crowdfunding would include maybe the printing of the book, would include the cost for the crowdfunding platform. They don't do this for free. So they're going to take a cut of your crowdfunded funding. And one of the other offers that I saw also offered pledgers, donors, sponsors, whatever you want to call them, some swag, meaning there was a mug with the book's name on it or the topic of the book. There was a t-shirt, all those kinds of things. All of those things cost money. They're not free. And so you really need to do a serious cost and profit margin analysis on doing a crowdfunding project. And you have to weigh that based on the potential sales or getting these pledges or sponsorships. how many of those can you get, and would that cost be a real investment for both them and for you? You know, you have to look at both sides of that equation. And I personally, I don't see it as a path that I would take, but I can understand why people would be doing it because they're really frustrated with not making enough money on standard platforms like Kindle Direct Publishing or Lulu or BookBaby or any of those. They're getting really frustrated with that, and I understand, but there are a lot of costs involved, and I just think it really hurts your image. Another thing you have to think about with these crowdfunding campaigns is that this will be considered income. This is not a gift to you. These could be considered sales. And then I don't know, and honestly, I really don't know how the transfer of product to your donors, is that considered a sale that would be subject to sales taxes? Now, in some states it might be, or in some regions it might be, and in others it may not. And then you have to think, well, I'm doing this online, so that could be impacted in a lot of different ways. Before you ever do one of these crowdfunding campaigns, have a sit down with a CPA or your tax advisor to figure out how it will impact you in terms of your income tax returns and the taxes you will have to pay. You also have to consider that some of these funding platforms are really built for nonprofit use. They're, you know, like the GoFundMe or Facebook's fundraising. These aren't just donations to you, and those are really designed for nonprofits. When you self-publish, you are an entrepreneur and you are a business. So you will be subject to taxes and just a whole myriad of issues. So please, 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 if you are going to consider this, do talk to your CPA before you ever do it. And here's something that I think is really unique to this whole crowdfunding book project idea is it becomes intellectual property, and after the funding campaign, you will probably sell the book on platforms such as Amazon. Now, will your donors be expecting a piece of the action post-funding crowdfunding program? Many of them won't. You know, they are familiar with how some of these programs roll, where you give them the money and they're not expecting too much from it, but there could be. And you would really hate to get stuck where some of these donors think they have a piece of your royalties action after the funding campaign. So you have to be very careful about how you present your offer to your potential sponsors and donors. And that will require you to talk to another professional, and that would be an attorney who is familiar with intellectual property. So, given all of those aspects of crowdfunding a book project, I wouldn't do it. I personally wouldn't do it, but I understand the appeal. And if you are going to do it with some professional advice. So I hope you found today's episode helpful as you consider your self-publishing endeavors. And if you did, please wander over to iTunes and give the Heidi Thorne Show a nice rating and review. And don't forget to subscribe to whatever platform you like to listen or view this podcast on. For the audio, it's on iTunes, Stitcher, and Podbean. And for the video, it is on YouTube. So if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you will get alerts on all of those episodes coming up. Now, my books are available on Amazon.com. You just have to search for Heidi Thorne, and my author page should come up in search. All my books, ebooks, and audiobooks are there. As well, my audiobooks are on iTunes and Audible. Thank you so much for listening and for your support. I'll look forward to talking to you again in the next episode. And in the meantime, have a great day.